Hello, my name is Emilio Ruiz and this is my video for Evidence 2. Today we will be going to talk about the results of Evidence 1, which leads to certain misconceptions about democracy, the case that has been chosen as to address these misconceptions, how DEI can serve as a framework to rebuild democratic systems and how it can be implemented, and a showcasing of the poster that I made and the meaning behind it. So first of all, I want to start with the case that I chose, which is the case of Viktor Orban in Hungary, which is a distorted sort of democracy. Right now, in 2025, Hungary is considered a partial democracy, which in my opinion is kind of misleading because it's not a democracy anymore, and especially since 2010, it has backpedaled despite still being a part of the European Union. Why? Well, Viktor Orban and his party called Fidesz have held a parliamentary supermajority, which has led to a constitution rewritten. He has also weakened the judiciary and the press, which means that he has oppressed uh, the free choice of expression and also various institutions, and he has reduced checks on executive power. So, first of all, constitutional manipulation. He essentially embedded nationalist and Christian values into the constitution. He also reduced the power of the court, and he allowed for a near complete party control over the institutions, which means that his own party and his own allies have control over the majority of the country. Speaking of institutional capture, he has also lowered the retirement age for judges, which means that he has forcefully retired several judges and replaced them with party loyalists. He has also killed independent journalism throughout Hungary, and he has merged over 200 media outlets. I think the number is closer to 400 actually, but he has merged them into pro-government conglomerates, which means he has restricted free speech and he manipulates media outlets to favor the perspectives of his own party. And he has also compromised the independence of electoral commissions and the prosecutor's office. This means that basically elections still do happen in Hungary. However, they are greatly manipulated. The opposite parties have very limited access to media, and Orban and his own administration can manipulate data and the general viewpoint of the elections. Also, he has suppressed minority rights. He has basically banned same-sex adoption. He has made the gender recognition for trans people illegal, and he has passed the child protection law, which bans LGBTQ plus content for minors technically, but also for the entire population, which is why several releases across the world in media, whether it's Hollywood or TV shows or whatever, they do not have a market in Hungary. So he has excluded minorities to appeal to the majority and marginalize them greatly. Also, I missed a certain detail about his electoral inequality, which means that independent media access is restricted. So basically, he does oppress the media access for the opposition, but he has also completely removed independent media access. Orban wins elections under highly distorted conditions, which is completely against the democratic ideals. Hungary is democracy in name only, and it's still named, as I said, a partial democracy. However, it is an electoral autocracy. Why is this relevant to the results of Evidence 1? Well, after doing several interviews across the tech community to students, to workers, to teachers, and so on, there have been several misconceptions. Most believe that democracy begins and ends with the ballot box. This is, of course, not stated as such throughout the interviews. However, it is greatly hinted at, as almost every single one of the interviewees pointed out elections as the main democratic quality. Also, almost none of them mentioned free press, institutional transparency, or minority rights as part of what should be a democracy, or what they think is a democracy. And another big misconception is the majority rule. Pretty much about asking for the majority's opinion and then making a choice upon that. None mentioned the reciprocal relationship that should be with the people and the leaders. Also, how power should be distributed throughout the institutions and so on. So basically, the results of evidence one point to the fact that most think electoral procedures are what a democracy is, and that is the biggest act of citizenship that you can have, and also the majority principle basically constitutes a democracy in a country. This relates extensively to the Viktor Orban case, because you could, upon the results of evidence one, you could technically argue that it's a democracy because there are elections and there have been several changes made throughout based on the majority principle, even if many have been done with the objective of oppressing people or of imposing certain values. However, this is entirely wrong because it goes directly against democracy and what inclusive leadership should be. As I said, free speech has been completely destroyed within Hungary. The elections are greatly manipulated, and although the majority principle is still technically followed, especially in how it has been implemented across the powers, it's still against democracy. Also, according to the readings that we made in class, especially one based on Javier Lupo Alcazar, Orban follows several traits that made him really dangerous. For example, he is a charismatic leader in times of crisis several times across his mandate. He has appealed to crisis across the country and uses charismatic power to appeal to the people. He has also applied populist rhetoric to win trust, and he greatly applies authoritarian control to maintain dominance. Pretty much, he has deconstructed the institutional system. He has implemented his own authority and control within every facet of the country, and so he now controls basically every power. This aligns more with tyranny than democracy, as we have discussed it beforehand, and Hungary is no longer a democracy. Another big lacking aspect about Orban's pretty much involvement in Hungary is missing DEI. So, what is DEI? DEI represents diversity, equity, and inclusion. In diversity, this means that one should recognize and empower marginalized voices, as they do deserve to have opinions and perspectives within the democratic system too, and ensure media and schools and other bodies that represent all segments of society. So, not really pushing people outside because of their different backgrounds or choices. Equity pretty much calls to redesign the laws and institutions to correct systemic disadvantages or to eliminate systems of oppression and to protect minority rights. Things that Hungary, or more specifically Orban and his party, have not done in the slightest. And in the case of inclusion, to build participatory structures and to guarantee freedom of speech, civil education, and pluralistic dialogue, which has also greatly been ignored and specifically destroyed across Orban's mandate. Why should we implement DEI across democracy? Well, we should, because DEI is not about just voting or the majority rule, and democracy is not individualist, it's collective. There should be institutional fairness, there should be civic participation, not only in the elections, but across several other viewpoints, so we can ensure to have a government that is fair, that is inclusive, that is diverse, and that constantly works towards equity. And Viktor Orban's Hungary is pretty much a system that appears to be a democracy technically, but it functions as a concentrated power, and it's more authoritarian than it is democratic. To avoid such results, we should pretty much work on a way to redefine what leadership is and also hold those people accountable. And we should implement DEI principles into democracy to ensure that all voices matter. We can recognize the marginalized people, we can recognize the needs of different groups, and with that, destroy systems of oppression and really give platforms so that all should have a voice and their opinions should be heard for a fair democracy to work. So, to conclude this video, for this evidence, we were asked to make a poster related to the case that we chose that also relays a certain message. So, this is the poster that I made. As you can see, here is Orban. I also chose to put the European Union stars in there because Hungary is still part of the European Union. And also the tagline, the majority's voice is not always the right choice. Why did I choose to put this phrase? Because a lot of what Orban has done, or a lot of how he has appealed to many or to the majority, is by doing just that, is by deconstructing the perspectives that the majority has on certain problems, like the LGBTQ, like religion, and so on, and greatly flaming on the division in the country. So I chose the tagline, the majority's voice is not always the right choice, also to signalize that this is a big misconception in democracy. There should always be a discussion between all groups, there should always be open dialogue, and there should always be a reciprocal quality that, that is divided throughout. So we cannot give all the power to a single person with their own opinion to rule overall. We should all have the opportunity to express ourselves and to find the best solutions for problems, not only because the majority says so, but because by recognizing the problems that several groups face individually, and also recognizing that democracy is a plural effort. It's never individualistic, and there should always be open dialogue. Viktor Orban is a big example of about the misconceptions of democracy in the 21st century. Democracy must go beyond voting. It must also represent diverse voices without judgment, guarantee equity under the law, and really implement inclusive participation, not every few years for a ballot, but every single day. This is why I chose Viktor Orban to be my case to analyze for this evidence, as well as to deconstruct the several misconceptions about the majority principle and what constitutes a democracy, and this has been my evidence too.